Yes, we are moving into summer. And before we get too far into the charts, let's start out with the surface analysis. And we take a look out to the western U.S., and we've got a powerful cold front moving into Utah, Arizona, and Southern California. And those are the early afternoon temperatures, 50s in Nevada and 60s in the San Joaquin Valley. Even where it's usually very hot in the Mojave Desert, 70s and low to mid 80s. How about that? And that's all being caused by this 1026 millibar high offshore, pushing that cold air into that part of the country. And as we saw yesterday, that cold air is not going to make much progress into Arizona. Temperatures staying in the 90s and low 100s, and then those will be rapidly coming up. And we're actually looking at a heat wave coming up around midweek next week. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Elsewhere around the country, cold front up in the Dakotas, bringing some 70s south, kind of a break from the heat up there. But most of that cold air is flowing upslope into Saskatchewan and Alberta. You can see that up there. In the southern U.S., under the influence of tropical air, 70s dew points coming all the way up into Kansas. And let's follow that moisture axis. That's going to be located about right here. You can see 77 at Wichita Falls, and we bring that up towards around Russell, Kansas, and up to North Platte where we've got 73, and that's the path of the moisture heading up towards that 998 millibar low in Montana. The other thunderstorm activity associated with that trough lifting out of Mexico, that's over the Appalachians this afternoon. And then we have this backdoor front in the northeast. Huge change in temperatures up in the Maritimes and Maine. We went from 90s all the way down into the 60s in that part of the country. Yep, there it is. Yep, 57 up there at Bathurst and 67 at Bangor at this hour. There's the satellite imagery for this afternoon. All the tropical air, you can kind of make that out, that very patchy, fine-grained texture due to the low cumulus across that region. Here's all the tropical continental air, the dry desert air right there over the southwestern U.S. into the Four Corners region. And then up in the northwest, there's that front coming out of the Pacific. It's a dry front down in Nevada and California, but up to the north, where you can see that faint circulation, that's going to be significant air mass modification and some instability in the mid and upper levels. The water vapor imagery, very important for this time of year. It may look like a mess, but let's break that down. First things first, this subtropical fetch of moisture coming up from the equatorial Pacific, that's heading up along a subtropical jet up and over that ridge. You can see the gravity waves up there in Wyoming. And some of that moisture rounds that ridge and comes south into Texas. Okay, so this is explained. We don't have to worry about that. Further out to the west, there's the front coming out of Nevada and California, extending up into this Bear Clinic low up there in Idaho and Montana. There's that Bear Clinic cyclone pattern up there in that region, with the dry slot coming into the Pocatello, Idaho area. And then further out to the east, this is all the tropical moisture with that slow-moving wave that came out of Mexico over the weekend, and that's producing thunderstorms in Virginia, southern Pennsylvania, all the way down to the Carolinas, and maybe as far west as Kentucky. And looks like there may be more breaking out later this afternoon, a little further to the west. And then up to the north, we've got the remnants of that other front. Remember on that surface chart, we had the tail end of that front coming out of the Canadian Maritimes and connecting back up into that other system in Canada. And this is a Bear Clinic pattern up there to the north. That's associated with another low up along that front, and that's pretty much everything. The driest air, ironically, over Texas and the Ozarks, and some subsidence out to the west from West Colorado into Wyoming. I want to take a closer look at those gravity waves. That's a very cool pattern. Yeah, it's too close. There we go. How about that? That's very neat. Are we seeing anything on the visible imagery? Nope, not at all. That's a reflection of some of the water vapor in the upper troposphere, and we know that because of those patterns, there's probably going to be a little bit of mountain wave activity there in that part of the country. And the turbulence product there showing some light to moderate chop across the central and northern Rockies, especially right there around Yellowstone. Now here's the pattern shift that we're talking about. We're going up to 200 millibars near the top of the troposphere. Very strong weather pattern there across California and Nevada. And we know from our rule of thumb for fronts, we would find that to the south of this polar front jet, not too far away from it, something like that. And then we have this ridging where we have the maximum warm air advection, which means there's going to be a warm front somewhere in that region. So that's the conceptual location of a frontal system, and that's of course verified by our surface data. Further out to the west, a ridge. This is a subtropical high, subtropical ridge extending up into Nebraska. So we would expect conditions to be fairly warm from New Mexico up towards Nebraska. Let's run the charts forward and see how things evolve. That jet max associated with that trough on the west coast moves up with the flow northeasterly into the Dakotas by Friday. Don't have much ridging in the southwest except over West Texas and the Panhandle, so it may be kind of warm there going into the weekend. However, as we get into next week, you can see that ridge starting to sneak around into northwest Mexico, and then it starts building in. There it goes. Anticyclogenesis, that's Monday, the 14th, and it gets even worse. And now we start to see a closed circulation right there over Denver, and they're going to see some of that heat there, especially in western Colorado. Going into Wednesday, that high kind of backs off a little bit to the southwest. That does put Texas under northerly flow. That increased shear could theoretically bump up the precipitation chances. You get more storm organization between the strong northerly winds and the southerly winds on the lower levels. Add those together and you get some moderate bulk shear. And then finishing out the week, that high stays locked over Utah and Colorado 1 week from now. There it is over the Four Corners area. And then it seems to break down around Friday next week. And then it sets back up over Arizona. Yep, going to be a scorcher there going into next weekend in Arizona. And after that, that gets to the end of the run, and it looks like the patterns start breaking down a little bit. More of a progressive flow coming in from the Pacific. And here's how things evolve, getting worse. This is today. These are the max temperatures officially forecast by the Weather Service. For Friday, a little bit warmer, 106 in Phoenix. For Saturday, 110s now showing up there and at Laughlin, Nevada. Even Grand Junction coming up to 99. For Sunday, even warmer, 113 in Phoenix. For Monday, 102 at Grand Junction, 115 at Phoenix. And for Tuesday, look at that, 116 at Phoenix and 104 at Grand Junction. This is coming up into record territory. That 104 at Grand Junction, well, here's the climate normals. The all-time high is 106 at Grand Junction. So we're within 2 degrees of that officially forecast and within 1 degree of the June record. So obviously we're talking about some serious heat here. Yep, 112 at Vegas. That's not near any all-time highs. However, 110 at Tucson, maybe about 3 decades ago, that would be getting close to an all-time high record there. But I think that's probably just going to break a record for the date. And then for Wednesday, that heat continuing, and with that ridge getting set up next week. Well, officially, the Weather Service doesn't forecast after Wednesday, but it does look like that heat will hang on there, and it could get even worse. Hopefully it doesn't, but that'll be something to watch for next week. So let's put it together with the forecast, and we can see on the thickness and pressure, that front is definitely evident. Can drop that right in there. Looks like it's coming through Kingman, through the Grand Canyon area down towards San Diego, and the northern end running something up into that region there. And you can see that fetch of tropical air coming right off the Gulf. The Gulf is open everywhere from about Victoria out towards the Big Bend. So going through the rest of the sequence here, so we're going to keep an eye on this baroclinic low coming across North Dakota, probably a corridor of some severe weather in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and northwestern North Dakota. And you can see that back builds down to the south overnight, MCS moving through the Corn Belt. And that's that big chunk of cold air coming in from the Pacific, finally emerging from the Rockies. And you can see on the tail end that intense heating has really eroded that part of the air mass, so not much reflection of it down to the south, and not very much of it going to make it into Texas. So anyway, that'll move into the Great Lakes area and Ontario and Manitoba. That's pretty quickly out of the picture, but it looks like a little chunk of it coming south over the weekend, and that'll give us a focus for a few thunderstorms Friday night into Saturday. The Gulf is not open. Notice that right there. So a little bit of a light and variable or northerly component off the Gulf. That'll restrict the moisture a little bit, but it looks like that gets set up again maybe around Monday. Anyway, a few thunderstorms out there in western Oklahoma for Monday, and maybe a few big ones out in Nebraska as well, and those come south as an MCS overnight. Starting to get that northerly flow that I talked about. So there you go. That'll support some thunderstorms across Texas and Oklahoma. And the only downside is I don't see the Gulf really set up. So, if we did have that southerly component coming off the Gulf with those thunderstorms coming south, that would be a potent MCS pattern, but I'm not really seeing that here. Looks like another cold front trying to come across the Pacific Northwest for midweek. Meanwhile, the heat gets going in Arizona and the Four Corners, and cold core system across New York. There it is. There's that front coming through the northeast U.S. So once again, they're getting some cool weather from this 1025 millibar high coming out of the Great Lakes. And up in Alberta, looks like they're getting themselves a pretty good system up in that region as well. Maybe some severe storms. Anybody want to go chasing up at Uranium City, Saskatchewan? I'm not even sure if there's any roads up there. And that's about it. A few more thunderstorm chances on the Central Plains, and that's about as far as I want to go. Yeah, GFS still trying to pull a tropical system up out of the Bay of Campeche into Texas. Maybe a little tropical storm. We'll have to keep an eye on that there. And that'll do it for this edition of Forecast Lab. Thank you for watching. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow for the Friday edition. Bye-bye.